Welcome to the 7th tutorial on the Introduction to Programming Using Python series. In this tutorial, we're going to be looking at Python dictionaries, also called maps and hashes in other languages. The second data structure we will cover is the map or dictionary. It's called dictionary or map because it holds key to value pairs. For example, the class grade list would be a dictionary, where the key would be the student name like John Smith or Nancy Drew, and the grade would be the value like 87 or 93. This data structure is called map in some languages such as Java and dictionary in others like Python, but the concept is the same. One thing to note is in Python, the type name is dict. Like the list is the type name for list, dict is the type name for dictionary. I mentioned that because if you look in Python and you type map, you will notice that it is a function. It's a keyword in Python, but it's not used for dictionaries. It's used for functional programming, which we may get to at some point in time. I mentioned that so that you're not confused. If you see the keyword map defined in Python, the type again is dict. So to define it, to define a new dictionary, you'll recall that to define a new list, we created the variable name and we said it's equal to empty square brackets. That would give you a new list. Now, squiggly brackets, that gives you an empty dictionary. Just to note, you could also use the type name, dict brackets, and you could do the same thing with list. List brackets would give you a new list. Okay, so your grades is now an empty dictionary. And just like you can for list, you can actually initialize your dictionary when you're creating it. So within the squiggly brackets, you'll recall the list items when you initialize them, you have to separate them by commas. The same thing, if you had multiple key value pairs, you would have to separate them by commas. But the dictionary also has a key and a value, and those are separated by colons. So let's see how that works. I have a John Smith, that's the key. Then I go colon, and then the value, 87. And then I go Nancy Drew, that's the key, colon, 93 is the value. So you can see that the colon separate the key from the value and the comma separates the key value pairs. We could have more if we wanted to. So now you could type grades and you can see that a new dictionary has been defined with these key values. Now to access a particular value in the dictionary, we can do that by using the variable name. So the dictionary variable name like grades, square brackets, and within the square brackets, this looks similar to the list, except it would not be the index we would put it within the square brackets, it would be the key. So in this case, you put the key in the square brackets, you hit enter, and that gives you back the value. Now, if we were to say grades and ask for a key that isn't there, Bob Cole, we didn't define Bob Cole in our dictionary, so Python would complain. We said, I don't have that key. Now, to enter that key, so to create a value for that key in the dictionary, we go grades at whatever the key is that you want, and we just assign the value to it. And Bob Cole likes the maple leaf, so let's give him a low grade. Now you go grades, and now you can see that it has been added. Now you might notice that even though we added Bob Cole later, this is the third entry in our dictionary, when we printed it, it came up first. And that's interesting that it did that. One thing you have to know is that dictionaries are not ordered. So they don't come out in the same order that they went in. There is no index. You can't access a value by the index. You can't say Bob Cole is the third item, therefore I'm going to go Bob, grades at index 2. Now, the other thing is there is no append function like there is in the list, and there is no remove function like there is in the list. So the only way to add values to the dictionary is what you have just seen, which is the dictionary variable name, square brackets, the key you want to add, and you assign to it the value you want to set. Similarly, you can only delete it by using the delete keyword. Let's say he drops out. So you go delete grades at the key Bob Cole, and now the grades list, the grades dictionary, sorry, is back to what it was before. So there are some notes to keep in mind here. Like I already mentioned, the keys are not sorted or ordered in any way. The order is not guaranteed. So this one time when we added a new key value pair, that key value went at the beginning. We might add another key value that would be added in the middle or at the end. The order is not guaranteed because the algorithm they use to store these key value pairs does not guarantee the order. So that's one thing. The keys can be any type. They don't necessarily have to just be strings. Um, so they can actually be integers. In fact, we can create a new map, a new dictionary. Let's call it D. And I can go D at 1. Okay, and that when you're going D at key 1 and D at key 2, remember these are keys, not indexes. It might look, and it does look the same as lists, but you have to be careful because these are not lists. These are keys, not indexes. So even if setting and retrieving them looks the same, they're not really the same. The order is not the same, and this is not an index. For example, you can go do something like this, and you can see that I have a key 1, 2, and then I have a key 200. In lists, remember, the indexes have to be in sequence. So if you only had 3 items, the indexes would be 0, 1, and 2, right? But these are not indexes. These are keys. So we can have different keys. They don't have to be strictly integers or strings. They can be other types as well. There are some restrictions, but for now, we're not going to get into them because all we're going to be using are basically strings, maybe integers. Same thing for the values. The value inside the map and also the item inside the list, they can be of any type, including other lists or maps. So you can have lists of lists, lists of maps, maps of lists, and so on. Now, just like the list, a dictionary should be used for related items. So if I create a dictionary, I give it a name like grades, and that tells you that I'm storing the grades, let's say for a class. Again, Python will not check on this, but the idea is that you will use something that is meaningful, not meaningless. So you will create a variable name that means something within the program you're creating, and you will use related values in a dictionary or a list. So a few more notes on dictionaries or maps. First of all, a dictionary or a map data structure does not allow duplicate keys. Now, we saw in lists that you could have the same item repeated more than once at a different index, but you can't have multiple keys repeated in the same dictionary. So let's say I created a dictionary for my grades. So my marks are whatever. If I were to add a new one or attempt to add a new one for English, let's say, and if I were to print my marks dictionary, I would notice that the value belonging to the key English has changed, right? Because remember, this is how you reset the value or create a new value for this key, right? But you can only have one key, one unique key in a dictionary. And so with this statement, setting the marks for the key English to value 88 would basically overwrite whatever was there before or create a new one if it isn't there. So you cannot have duplicate keys. Second thing is, in lists, we saw that I could have two lists, list 1 and list 2, and I could go list 1 plus list 2. I can add them, and the resulting list would be basically the newly created list would be all the items from list 1 followed by all the items from list 2. The reason why that works for lists but not maps is for lists, you could have duplicate items. So if I had the same item in list 1 and list 2, when I add them, I don't lose anything. The item from list 1 would still be there. The item from list 2 would be there. They would be duplicated in the resulting added list. But that doesn't work for a dictionary. So let's say if I had another dictionary, marks 2, so I can see here that my marks 2 dictionary has programming and English keys. My marks has English and math keys. So if I wanted to add them, what would the result be? Which English key value pair would be there? I mean, the key would be the same. It would be English because you can only have one, but would it be the 76 or would it be the 50? So that's why you can't go marks plus marks 2. That wouldn't work. Python would complain. What you can do is you can go marks dot update. So update is a type function that works on types of dictionaries, and you can give it a new dictionary. What that will do is it will update the original marks dictionary with all the key value pairs from marks 2. And that basically tells you what to do. That tells you if you find in marks 2 a key that I already have here, you will overwrite it. So you see now, I've taken the English from marks 2 and I overwrite the English that I already had because what I said is marks dot update marks 2. If I said marks 2 dot update marks, then I would have taken the one I had in marks and updated the one in marks 2. So this is how you can sort of add dictionaries together by using this update function. Now, if you wanted to check if a key was there, remember that when we go marks, we saw on the previous slide, if we said a key that isn't there, let's say science, we know that we don't have science, it would complain. If I don't want it to complain, if I wanted to check beforehand, I could use the in, just like we can for lists. I can go science in marks, that would give me a true or false. So false means it's not, true means it is. I can also use the len function, and that would tell me how many items I have in that map. So today's exercise is to create a program that will build a grade dictionary, initialize it with 5 names and grades, and then the program, when it runs, it will ask the user 5 times. So you will have to do this 5 times. Each time it will ask the user to enter a name. If the name is already in your grade dictionary, it will say the grade for this name is, and you tell them the grade. Would you like to change it? If they say yes, it will prompt the user to enter a new mark for that student, and it will save it in the grade dictionary. If the user says no, it keeps going. Now, if the name is not in the grade dictionary, it will ask the user to enter the mark for that student, and it will save it in the grade dictionary. When you have done this 5 times, it will say the grades look like this, and you just print the grades like we did print the list before. We don't have to format it, we just have to print it. We'll look at formatting later on. Now remember, you're going to have to repeat this 5 times. Remember last time for the exercise with the list, you had to prompt the user for their 4 courses. And that was a bit redundant because you actually had the exact same statement 4 times. This one, we have more than a statement. We have like a block of code that we're going to repeat 5 times. And it'll look boring and it won't make sense, but it's a good segue for the next time when we start looking at loops. So please give this a try. Do copy and paste. It's okay for now. It's not proper programming. We'll learn how to do this using for loops and while loops next time around. Now, when we run the program, this is what it will look like. So if I go run, once you've done your program, call it grades dictionary exercise or something like that. Now I've initialized, and you can't see that because I'm not showing you my program, I've initialized it with John Smith, Jane Austen, Muhammad Ali, Janet Jackson, and Bob Marley, right? Now the user hasn't seen this before, so they go, for example, if they pick a name that's already in the list, it says we have Jane Austen with a mark of 82. Would you like to change the mark? If the user says yes, it will say enter the new mark. And let's say we change that. That's done. Now on to the next iteration. Enter a name, Bob Marley. It says we have Bob Marley with a mark of 92. Would you wish to change that? The answer is no in this particular instance. Now we keep going. Enter a name, Bob Ali. We do not have Bob Ali in our grades dictionary. Enter a new mark. Okay. And now after it has done this a total of 5 times, it will say, here's the updated grades dictionary, and you just print the grades dictionary. Remember we did that for the list last time. So it will print the combined original 5 with whichever changes that the user has made in the exercise. So please give this a try, and remember, if this looks boring when you do repeat the same code block over and over again, it is, and it doesn't make sense. And we'll learn how to do it in for loops, but do it this way this time so that loops make sense to you next time. So like we saw on the previous slide in the exercise description, next time around we're going to start looking at looping, which is how to repeat ourselves without copying and pasting and boring ourselves. Until next time.